Patty, this is an ambitious show. So did you organize it around it? And you talk about motherhood and your relationship with your daughter. Is that the theme, or would you, it's called story? What is the theme?
Well, it was important to have a theme that everybody could connect to, and certainly we've all been brought to this planet and birthed. So in a complicated world, it was important to do something that was just core basic. And Margot and Margot had moved to San Francisco to be in the tech industry, and I was in New York working from my studio in Greenpoint, Brooklyn. And once in a while, we would do the AIR postcard show. And it was great fun to do small work. So we started a postcard exchange, which is something that we do in our family. And Margot was industrious and loved sending them back to me. And the show developed from the postcard exchange and the imagery that was developed from that. And also, I had gone on a residency before the pandemic in a small town called Cuesta in New Mexico, about 45 minutes from Taos, 8,000 feet above sea level. And I did this series of very gestural, large paintings, painting on the floor, having the luxury of a big studio space to work from. And my studio actually opened up so that I could work indoors and outdoors. So we had this sort of transition between outdoor and indoor and lockdown and intimate, and photographing things like the laundry room and the eggs boiling on the kitchen stove, topics I never would have really thought about at another time, another place, in another context. I use a lot of parallels of the umbilical cord in the work because the umbilical cord is kind of like our power cord in a way. We are plugged in all day long to our power sources. This is our labor. We're scribes. We work on our laptops, and this has kind of saved us really as a society economically, that we can continue working. It's the ties that bind us.
That's what I'm reading. Margot, do you want to comment on that a little bit? Because you were locked down for a while with your family, as many people were.
It was great. We got the opportunity to really get to know each other, both in a professional setting and, outside of just being family together. And as my mom mentioned, I was in San Francisco at the time. And did have periods where I'd come back for a handful of weeks to stay with them. And the postcards that we did, basically my mom would send postcards to me, have them stamped. I would tweak them and do my own art on top of that, send it back, and then she would work on them and was inspired by those postcards for the work we did.
And you will see Margot's postcard. One of the most important ones is by her christening gown, which is a turn-of-the-century gown with intricate hand embroidery and cutwork. Turn of the century is over. I mean, I'm not a numbers person, but Victorian era would be 18. So it's over 100.
Is it a family piece?
A family piece, and it has. Margot did a postcard called "Protect," made with lace and also you photocopy broken glass actually, which and lace, and you did this piece, which is very important to the show. And the christening gown, again, in new context this week, actually hours before the show officially opened, it has daisies, which are sunflowers. They're part of that family of flowers, and it has the sunburst at the bottom of the dress. The sunflowers reflect joy and rebirth, and wisteria, our troubles, our hardships, our tears, and flowing vines. So there's in Christianity, those are all Christian symbols, and as we know, the sunflower is the symbol for the Ukraine, and they are worldwide. I believe one of our members wore a mask last night that had daisies on it, and I said, "Oh, you've got the same flower as the symbol of the Ukraine," and she said, "This is an African fabric." So you can see that this iconography exists in many cultures, and it's very important to the storytelling people couldn't read a long time ago. So you told stained glass stories through stained glass and carvings and
So that brings me to another question that we have considered, which is you have the option of putting together recognizable objects, altering them electronically, and also in your print process, which is not what you might think, at least not what I would think. So could you talk a little bit about how you made these works that combine symbols? Some of them are real, some of them are added, some of them are photographed, some of them are added after. It's not a Photoshop process.
It is not a Photoshop process. It's a real core basic making an image on a photocopy machine, my HP printer, and then running other images on top of them. Some of the imagery has about 4 layers of texture, motifs, color, and then even at the end I discovered a fun app on my phone, which is a Pixlr, and you can add texture and frames around your work and layer them. The pictures are taken from family photo albums. None of them are from the web. They're all authentic pictures from found pictures and the family albums, and shot right in the kitchen, the laundry room, while cooking and being home a lot. There's the one that's called Our Labor we'd come back from Costco and bought towels, but they happen to be called Viva towels. So they're in there, and remember the toilet paper? At the beginning, how much the scarcity of it all, and paper towels. So all of that sort of made its way into the story.
I'm impressed that so many things inspire you, and this covers one person's ontological journey, I guess, to this point, and your life to this point, and at the same time you are able to reach inside yourself and pour out, I guess, emotions or a sense of kinesthetic kind of art making. And do you want to talk a little bit about how these big abstract works are different, or how they, what was the process that made them so different than the more intimate works that are layers and layers of symbols? These, I'm assuming, are 1 or 2 passes.
Yes, these were created on the floor, and the canvas was shipped to the mountains. A UPS delivered. They were measured and cut so that I had lots of them, and I didn't have to deal with framing them or stretching them to work. They all had to be rolled up like a carpet and sent back home. So they were, there was a lot of travel involved, a lot of looking at all the beautiful national parks in the area and absorbing the light, and waking up in the morning and walking with the residency and a few dogs. And they had an immense property, so that every morning it was June, the crocuses were coming out and the lilies were coming out, and it was so colorful and beautiful. So the process there was extremely liberating and free, to the point of, okay, now this is where the story gets a little more, personal, but I was 60-something years old, and I'd never really done anything kind of wacky and wild as an artist, but this was an opportunity to pump up the music, get naked, and drink a glass of wine, and just paint. So there are footprints and handprints, and I do think I slipped a few times on the canvas, and realized that this was something that just had to come out. And it was sort of this emotional explosion, and it was using my entire body, my entire wingspan, and just never painted that way before. I've always done little safe, quiet little watercolors, and here was a chance to have some fun, sort of making up for lost time. And after a while, there were Boy Scouts that had a camp nearby, and I had always closed the curtains, and I started getting cold, and so I thought I'll just do the barefoot part, because it takes 5 hours to get all this paint out of your hair after this. They're all acrylic, and the pots were all over the floor with buckets of water, and it was just very spontaneous and intuitive.
I think aesthetically, that's a powerful combination that I wouldn't expect, perhaps, in the gallery show. Such interior colors, which you have, I guess, are stimulated by the environment. Interior gestures and power. I'm guessing somewhat driven by having been constrained by the lockdown and being in this big open space. And then the intimate work, which involves a lot of detail and printing. I mean, that's quite a range as an artist. So, are you going to...
Contrast is important. If they'd all been big and splashy, or they'd all been small and intimate, it wouldn't have had the same. I mean, this was unexpected that these paintings were going to be shown until the last minute. I thought the whole show originally was just going to be photography. So
We haven't talked about. We talked about the mother and the umbilical cord, and that as a symbol, as an extent, a conceit maybe that stretches across the whole story. But can you talk a little bit about the specific symbols you used? You talked about the flowers and some of the colors, I think.
you know what's interesting is that a lot of the symbolic things sort of happen in a very organic kind of way. And it's not until the show is up on the wall that you start thinking, what was I thinking when I did this? And then you begin to see a lot more layers. For instance, the river, this one is called the river runs through. And there's a national park where the Rio Grande comes together with the Red River. And flowing of red blood, menstrual cycles, primitive painting in the Lascaux caves where handprints were done, perhaps during monthly periods where they held their babies, and there are little baby prints on walls. All of this, and the flowing of the river, one was very white and frothy, and the other one was full of minerals that made it red. So the white, suddenly next to the mother nursing, became mother's milk. And then the locket, which was my grandfather's locket and my mother's postcards from 1944 when Paris was liberated, another army invading a country. We have collective memories as we are born with collective memories, some of which is a lot of trauma and a lot of joy and love. So it opened up, my background was in psychology. I trained as a therapist, believe it or not, and not as an artist. But all of this subliminal meaning is still unfurling itself. And it's important that everybody read the symbols. We have the scissors, the cutting of the umbilical cord over here, the cutting of the apron string, the red ribbon, again, a symbol of flow, and messages on notebooks, domestic appliances, and also innocence on one coat hanger and loss of innocence on another print, combined with the innocence and joy of childhood. When going to the amusement park, laughing and being so full of joy and wonder, living in your cardboard castle and being a princess. So it's totally about all of these opposites and how they come together to tell a story.
Who are the folks that you think about or used to think about or inspired you?
Well, certainly my mom, who was Parisian, and one of the postcards here is March 1944, which we talked about, the liberation of Paris. So the locket was my grandfather's gold locket that he kept his watch. And my own parents, my father was a baker. So when he came home and we would hug him, he was all dressed in white. The color white comes up again. And he smelled of sugar because he was a baker, sugar and flour. So there was always this, one of the pieces with the cotton candies called Sweeter Than Sugar.
Wow.
And so anyone is welcome to take some sunflower seeds before you go. And special thanks to Jeff McCauley. Stand up, come on, Jeff, here. And Margot McCauley, my beautiful, beautiful family, and the entire Prince Street Gallery Village. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks so much.